Welcome back to Love, Life, and Legacy, the podcast dedicated to helping you navigate these hypersexualized times of ours. And in today's episode, I'm going to do a deep dive into purity. And it's going to be such a wonderful journey. I've got amazing clips. I've got, poems. I've got a lot of Bible verses, quotes from true parents. And not only that, in all of my research, because this took a long time to put together, I found the official High Noon song. Now, this has not been approved by anybody other than me, but when you listen to the lyrics, and it's at the end of the episode, you will see that there's a song that everybody knows sitting right in front of our face, and it is the most High Noon song ever. It's in the lyrics, it's in the feeling, it's in the expression, it's the greatest. So let's go on a journey together as we explore the importance of purity and how to get it. Let's go. All right, so this is genuinely going to be fun, and I can't wait to share this with you. What I've done is I've put together 6 different sections, okay? And we're going to go through this. I'm guessing I'm going to have to break this up into 2 episodes just so that you can hear the first one, process it, and then move on to the next one. Because if I give you too much at once, you might want to pass out. But since it's all really good information, I want to pack it all in, but also spread it out. So we're going to talk about what is purity, what is sexual purity. We're going to talk about how broken our culture is. We're going to talk about solutions. We're going to talk about how purity is a state of being. And lastly, I'm going to give you some very nice action steps that you can work on. And all of this is in the realm of figuring out how to live the purest lifestyle and why that's probably the best choice you can ever make in your life, right? So before I kind of get into sexuality, I just want to go into purity in general. And I have a really nice quote from the Bible that expresses, in my opinion, really well the importance of purity. So let's give it over to my man Jesus, as played by some random AI voice guy named Roger.
Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Matthew 5:8.
Thank you so much, Roger, for that. You'll be hearing from Roger throughout this episode, as well as an AI gal named River. I just think it's nicer to have dynamic voices, and I can rely on AI to do a good job. So this quote is super nice because it's simple. And my wife always reminds me that God is simple. Love is simple. We make these things complicated, but they're inherently simple. So when you hear something like, blessed are the pure in heart, that sounds pretty nice and pretty cool, but does that make you pure? So the first question I'm asking in this episode is, what is purity itself? How do you attain purity? Well, first you have to define what it is. And I have another quote from the Bible that actually helps to break down the human into 4 parts so that we can understand how to achieve purity, because it's not just like a static state. It's the harmony of a few things working in tandem. So when you have harmony of these elements, that's how I believe you can achieve purity. So I'm going to throw it back to my man Jesus, as read by Roger.
One of the teachers of the law came and heard them debating. Noticing that Jesus had given them a good answer, he asked him, "Of all the commandments, which is the most important?" "The most important one," answered Jesus, "is this. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. The second is this. Love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these." Mark 12:28-31.
I think about that quote a lot. I actually did a 21-day condition where all I did was memorize this quote and say it over and over again in my head. It's very helpful because you can really tell, am I really loving God with all of me based on these aspects, right? With all of my heart, with all of my soul, with all of my mind and all of my strength. And I use strength to correlate with body. So like my actions, my physical actions, am I living in accordance with my love of God? And this is such a cool way to live, right? So the purity of your heart, the purity of your soul, the purity of your mind, the purity of your body. That's such a great framework, and we've been teaching that in High Noon for quite some time. And, it's not the easiest thing in the world to find quotes or songs or anything about the purity of your soul or your mind. But I do have some good ones to share with you about the purity within your heart. So let's go back to the Bible for that.
If anyone purifies himself from what is ignoble, then he will be a vessel consecrated and useful to the master of the house, ready for any good work. So shun youthful passions and aim at righteousness, faith, love, and peace, along with those who call upon the Lord with a pure heart. 2 Timothy 2:21-22.
So, just to be clear, ignoble means not honorable in character or purpose, so kind of a dishonorable person. So, this quote is really talking about how, in order to do the right thing, you got to let go of your youth, your kind of immaturity, and aim at righteousness, faith, and love and peace. And if you love God with a pure heart, that's the ticket. That's your ticket to maturing in these areas of life. So another great quote there. And I have one last quote from you from different scriptures. This one's actually from Hinduism, and it actually talks about how you can purify different aspects of your internal self. So let's get into it right now.
The body is cleansed by water. The internal organ is purified by truthfulness. The individual soul by sacred learning and austerities. The intellect by true knowledge. Hinduism, Laws of Manu, 5.109.
Right. So this all sounds really good. I hope you like these quotes, and I hope they're kind of inspiring something in you that purity is absolutely important and it's possible. And like I said, I believe that the context of seeing purity through your mind, your heart, your spirit, and your body is the easiest framework. But obviously it's not that easy. If it was, then we'd all just do it. We would just be pure people with pure thoughts and pure hearts and all this. But there's some complexities. And part of the complexities originate from just bad teaching, just from people giving us all sorts of ideas. And I want to give you a couple examples, just so that you can understand the world that we live in, because part of purity is what comes into us through our senses, right? And if we're always being bombarded with idealistic viewpoints and hopeful ideas, then obviously that would help to contribute to a more purified perspective and optimism and all this. But in fact, there's a lot of naysayers. Most people don't believe in things like world peace. They don't believe that humanity is going to survive the next 100 years. There's so many doubters and naysayers, right? But there's also religious figures who step on the toes of purity. It's very bizarre. And I want to first give a shout out to this guy named Sadhguru, who's kind of famous online. And he's this Guruji who goes around on a motorcycle just talking. He's not married. He doesn't really have any substance. And that's part of his gig. He's just this wise bearded man who's supposed to know all the answers. And if you listen to this clip, I think you can see that possibly he doesn't have all the answers. Let's go.
If you go about sifting in the mind, what is pure thought, what is impure thought, oh, you will go. And if you're trying to curb the impure thought and produce pure thought, you've finished. All the things that these so-called religions told people are sins, they have become the full-time activity of human mind. If they had just left them alone, everybody according to his inclination would have gone where he has to go. Now it's not like that, it's painted in everybody's mind because they said this is a sin, do not think about it. Endlessly they're thinking about it. They're not even as free as dogs and cats are, human beings. Simply because somebody put this idea that there's something pure and impure. Whatever impure things you learnt at the age of 25, I do not know. I have not come in touch with anything impure in the world yet.
Okay, there's a lot of questionable ideas out there, and I don't want to harp on them, But the reason I brought this clip on is to explain that, ideas like that can be quite seductive. It's like, yeah, religion always focuses on how impure we are, right? And that can be very destructive. But to assume that we don't need guidance and that we'll naturally find the way, I think is such a farce. It's such a joke that I don't know if this guy's ever gone into a city. I mean, he's from India, and there's a lot of evil in India because there's a lot of evil everywhere. And it's not because of religion that we're evil. We just are immature and we don't understand how to live life. We need to go through a purification process. So again, I don't want to dwell on that. But when you juxtapose that, which is we are all naturally pure, versus this next clip that I'm about to show you, which says that we're all basically impure, I want to just show you the two extremes that exist in terms of ideologies.
The word purity is not synonymous with virginity or abstinence or never having seen pornography. The word purity is not where we begin. Psalm 51 tells us you were born sinful. You may have never been pure. Purity is not something you can lose. It might be something you never had. The Greek word used here in this passage in 2 Timothy or Titus, wherever we are. Some days I prove I was born blonde. It means pure, clean, without fault, chaste, exciting reverence, sacred. It is a word that came from a word that means holy. You know what that means? It's not just those of us that have been stained by the pain of sexual sin, but every single one of us that should feel overwhelmed at this word when it appears in the pages of Scripture, falling on our faces before God, crying mercy.
So, yeah, it's just not easy, right? Because on the one hand, you got this guy saying, hey, we'll all figure it out. We don't need to think about the fact that we're impure. We're good. And then you have somebody who's like, we are totally impure, right? How do you navigate these waters? Well, that's why in summary of this first section, which is what is purity, I really think it's a matter of childishness, kind of like no hang-ups, freedom, unlimited, the idea of shimjang, the irrepressible urge to give love. If that's spewing from our mind and our hearts and our spirits, and if our body acts so lovingly, I think that's a good start. And I wanted to give you a quote from Mahatma Gandhi. This is from 1921 when he was speaking to a magazine or a newspaper, I think, called Young India. And he said this: true art takes note not merely of form, but also of what lies behind. There is an art that kills and an art that gives life. True art must be evidence of happiness, contentment, and purity of its authors. Think about that in terms of your life. That with our life, we can kill, meaning physically, obviously, but we can also kill our own hopes and our dreams. We can hurt other people and get in the way of God's providence if we're not coming from a pure-hearted place. And the more pure that we are, the more that we can create joy as evidence of our happiness and contentment. So don't worry, we'll get there. I want to take you to the next section, which is all about what is sexual purity specifically.
Hey guys, just a quick interruption. If you want to get pure, more pure, and figure out what purity is all about, then we have an opportunity for y'all. Go to highnoon.org. Check out our completely free webinar at highnoon.org to get free from porn and masturbation. Specifically, if you are someone that wants to have integrity, that wants to be pure, purify your mind, your heart, your spirit, all of that, check it out, highnoon.org. I look forward to seeing you there.
All right, so we're going to talk about what is sexual purity specifically. And in order to explain this, I want to help you to understand that this has been an evolutionary process. There was the way that we used to teach as religious people what is sexual purity, and it wasn't very constructive. High Noon has labeled this as Purity 1.0. I'm going to get into 2.0 after, but I really want to outline the harms that Purity 1.0 caused. They created a lot more problems than I think we realized. And I want to share with you a clip. So this is actually a pastor giving a sermon about the shortcomings of Purity 1.0. He's telling a story. I kind of cut it in the middle, so it's not too long, about a time that he was, I think, in college, and he was witnessing to this young lady who's actually a single mom. She had a storied background and she did not have a man in her life, but she had a couple kids. So clearly she had kids out of wedlock and all this stuff. And he was trying to witness her, trying to bring her closer to God. And he brought her to a concert, a Christian concert that his friend was playing at. And after his friend played music, there's a pastor that got on stage. And for the rest of the story, well, I'll let the guy tell it.
The minister got up and he said, "Today I want to talk to you about sex." And so I immediately go, uh-oh, this could be a problem. And he took a red rose and he smelled it and he showed how pretty it was, and then he threw it out into the crowd. He goes, "Everybody needs to smell this." There's about 1,000 of us there, almost all of us college and high school. Smell the rose. I want you to smell it. I want you to touch it. I want you to see the texture in it. Do it, and I'm going to teach. And then he began what honestly, up until this day, and this might have to do with my heart, I'm still wrestling, was one of the worst, most horrific handlings of what sex is and what it isn't that I ever sat through. It was fear-mongering at its best. It was, you don't want syphilis, do you? And everybody's smiling and having a good time until there's herpes on your lip, and you, right? And so I'm just thinking with Kim beside me, what are you doing? What are you doing? And then as it wraps up, he goes, where's my rose? Where is it? Where's my rose? And some kid came up, the rose is just completely jacked up. It's broken, the things are off, the petals are broken. And he lifts it up, and his big crescendo, his point is to hold up that rose and go, now who would want this? Who would want this rose? And I remember feeling anger, like real, legitimate, I want to hurt him anger. And it was all I could do not to scream out, Jesus wants the rose. That's the point of the gospel, that Jesus wants the rose.
His emotion was palpable in that clip. I'm sure you could hear it and feel it. And I understand it, because oftentimes people who have good intentions educate about sexual purity in the exact wrong way, and it ends up causing the exact opposite of their desired intentions. So how do people come to this conclusion? Well, I want to highlight a couple of biblical quotes here that you can see that people could take these quotes and just throw them in somebody's face and say, why aren't you like this?
But as for the cowardly, the faithless, the detestable, as for murderers, the sexually immoral, sorcerers, idolaters, and all liars, their portion will be in the lake that burns with fire and sulfur, which is the second death. Revelation 21:8.
You see, that's pretty harsh. It puts adulterers and the sexually immoral in with the sorcerers and the liars, the detestable, and it says they're all going to die a second death, right? Which sounds really harsh, needs a lot of unpacking in order to see, well, what's the value of a statement such as this, right? And then you also have quotes like this, which through a certain perspective is quite helpful. Through another, it's actually ammunition to hurt somebody. It says, it's from Matthew 5:18, and it says, "But I say unto you, that whosoever looketh at a woman to lust after her hath committed adultery with her already in his heart." Right? Which is, again, true, and it's part of what we're dealing with pornography, but quotes like this can often be used to hurt rather than to uplift people. And so it causes a lot of people to feel like they only have two choices. They can feel ashamed of themselves and just, I'm a sinner, right? Which is that first clip, that pastor lady, just, I suck, I'm a sinner, I'm stuck like this, I'm dirty. Or the other one, which is to justify and reject, which says, no, you're wrong, I'm right, this feels good, so who are you to tell me anything, right? And so the high noon way is never either one of these, is to feel ashamed or to feel justified. It's always in the middle to work through. Okay, and I will get into that. What does that mean? But it's really important to understand that, like, we are evolving not only as a species and with technology and whatnot, but also that's the divine principle. That's the whole point of our movement, is to help us spiritually evolve. And part of that is that we are teaching these topics in higher, more enlightened ways, thanks to true parents who unearthed these ideas about the sexual organs. Again, I'll get into it. But we understand through divine principle that the fall of Adam and Eve was what caused us to be separated from God. And the fall is also a sexual act. But how you use that information, how you tell that story, the lessons learned and how to move forward is where the nuance is and where the evolution either takes place or doesn't. And so when people use these stories, these quotes from the Bible and from the divine principle, they can use it to cause people to feel fear or to feel hope, right? Fear is not love. Fear is fear. And fear stays with people. And when all you do is fearmonger about the dangers, the possibilities of what might lie on the other side of whatever it is that they're contemplating, then what they're left with is a dysfunctional relationship with that thing. We've seen this happen in the blessing so often that people are scared into a state where everything that they relate with sex is negative. And once they do get blessed and the doors are open, they are too afraid to act on it, and it creates massive dysfunction within the relationship. So when you hear clips like this,
when sexual desire rises, Satan shifts his missile carriers into high gear.
Then you can understand why Purity 1.0 wasn't sufficient to make people into robust, loving, highly functional, highly marriageable people. So I want to end this section of what is Purity 1.0 with this kind of explanations. Doing nothing can't define you. The things that you don't do can't be the things that define you. So the fact that you don't have sex, the fact that you just remain sexually abstinent, that's not the point. That's a means to an end. But what is that end? Because abstaining from anything doesn't necessarily make you healthy. If you are really good at not eating junk food, it doesn't mean that you're eating healthy food. It just means that you're not eating junk food, right? It's a good maybe first start, but it is not a holistic view of health. And the same is true of sexuality. Just because you're not having sex does not mean that you have a pure mind or a pure heart or a pure spirit or a pure body. And if you want an example of this, then I want to just play this short clip for you. Precious. Yeah, that guy probably is not having a lot of sex. He's a weird creature who lives in a cave, right? Is he pure? Absolutely not. Is he a murderous villain to good? Absolutely. But he's not having promiscuous sex, right? So this is obviously a ridiculous, extreme example, but it's true nonetheless that even him, he's considered technically sexually pure by some. But when you look at Purity 2.0, and that's what I'm going to get into, you realize that actually it's much more constructive of a definition. And I'm sorry, Gollum, you might not qualify. All right, so before we get into Purity 2.0, I wanted to stop and focus the section on kind of looking at sexual purity at scale. Like, it's not just about you, it's about our society too. And when our society is more sexually pure, it's so advantageous for so many different ways. And when we're not, we start to lose a lot of the basic freedoms that you might not expect are associated to sexual purity, right? And so in this section, it's based on, these talks that we've been giving about sexual purity. And when you learn about sex from pornography and from our media, what it does is it trains you to view sex as hormonal, not spiritual. So it's only to satisfy the body and nothing else. That's very materialistic. and it's very short-sighted, right? It also, when you engage in the physical act of sex, either by yourself through masturbation or with others, without heart or commitment or any of this, it actually, the net result is that it creates distance between hearts, between you and other people, which is why pornography leads to isolation. Or with other people, if they're engaging in heartless sex, it makes them like each other less until they can't coexist, right? And also, it's used as a tool of avoidance in terms of spirit. So in terms of the mind, in terms of the heart, in terms of the spirit, it's used as a tool of avoidance rather than connection, which is what our soul longs for, is to be connected to Heavenly Parent, to ourselves, and to other people. And it takes us away from all of that because we're using sex as a form of escape rather than connection. And so instead of just you taking my word for it, I want to introduce you to a book that I just recently found out about in a meeting with Dr. Hendricks, Tyler Hendricks. It was not even about this. It was just like accidentally and incidentally introduced me to a book called Sex and Culture by J.D. Unwin. Okay, it was published in 1934. And this guy studied 80 societies spanning thousands of years. And what he found was really crazy. He discovered that cultures that uphold sexual restraint, particularly monogamy, experience greater creativity, prosperity, and societal progress, while those that embrace sexual permissiveness often face stagnation and eventually decline. So through meticulous research and a data-driven approach, Unwin presents a really amazing thesis that transcends moral or religious arguments, right? It's not just about that. It's just evidence that a certain way of life is more beneficial for the individual and subsequently for society when a bunch of people act like this, and it shapes an entire culture. And he broke it down into basically 5 different categories that you can look at. And you can measure these. There's a good side if you live a certain way, and that's sexual purity. And then there's the bad side, which is if you don't, if you just have a free sex culture, okay? And I want to go over each of these different sections. So the first section is about cultural energy. And when there's prenuptial chastity and when there's monogamy in committed relationships, the culture itself has far greater cultural energy to do cool things. Why? Because they're not wasting their energy with all the drama associated with breaking up with people, with not knowing who you're going to sleep with tonight, or all these different things about preoccupying yourself with the obsession of sex for self-gratification, right? And when a culture does have free sex, like America's been experiencing, then there's the erosion of cultural energy. So these are things like divorce and what that does to a family and how it creates isolation. We right now have still an opioid crisis where there's 109,000 drug overdose deaths recorded every year, 75 of which involve opioids, right? So there's all these kind of fallouts that stem from a society that's not engaged in some very fundamental universal principles as it pertains to sexual purity. The next category is on the plus side, the beneficial side. When a culture has its sex together and it's together with God, they have enhanced social cohesion. And that means individuals who have sexual purity and are clear, and they form clear relationships based on monogamy, are much more able to build families that can build neighborhoods, that build societies that actually are constructive and work well together, versus the weakening of family structures, which is, we're seeing this crazy stat that I found was that the percentage of children born to unmarried mothers has risen from 5% in 1960 to 40% in 2021, right? This is a kind of a disturbing trend that the kids are not being raised by both parents. The next category is that there's higher investment in future generations when a society has its sexual energy in the right place, because they're building, right? They're building something with their sexual energy as individuals, as families, And when the families are not breaking apart, that they're accumulating resources and wisdom and knowledge that they can pass down to subsequent generations because their energy isn't being dwindled or siphoned by drama, by divorce, by fighting each other. But conversely, there's increased social tensions on a collective scale when there's tension and unresolved tensions within the individual and family when there's, unclear sexuality present. And I found a statistic about social tensions that 46% of Americans have experienced estrangement from family members, often driven by lifestyle differences, including relationships and morality. And so much of this is because people are fending for themselves and they're creating ideas for the world by themselves because they're not that close to their parents. They don't trust or listen to their parents, oftentimes because parents don't trust or listen to each other. And so it's a pattern that exists in the individual and then in the family. And again, so much of this ties back to sexuality. And what this has done, a lot of this dysfunction, starting from the individual to family, has now created a situation where people are really afraid of marriage. Less and less people are getting married. So within the United States, the marriage rate has declined by 60% since 1970 to a historic low. It's like, obviously, an epidemic, and it makes sense for a lot of people. They've seen their parents, they've seen a lot of other people's parents, and they don't want that. And so they just shop around and just try to figure it out for themselves because they don't have anything to inherit from their parents. And so they have to figure out sex and relationships all by themselves, which is a huge consumer of energy. And the last point is this, that when a society is really clear on their own sexuality, their sexual purity, they make much more aligned decisions socially in terms of laws, in terms of protecting children, in terms of a vision forward. And when there's a decay in value of sex, there's a decay in moral and ethical standards. And we've seen this very clear. I would love to do an episode about the kind of hippie movement and what that did for us sexually, and then subsequently with divorces and just kind of chaos in our society. But if you think about it, our permissiveness and our acceptance of things like porn and, like 50 Shades of Grey, you heard that clip. These things are happening because the people who make movies, the people who make laws are also very much, in many cases, involved in this sexual unclarity. And so how do we end up in a society where we have 1.5 million content creators on OnlyFans, right? Pornography used to be something that very few people created, and it was always something that was kind of in the back alley because deep down our society knew that this is not really healthy. And now to create on OnlyFans is being justified as legitimate work just the same as any other job. How does this happen? Well, it happens when there's no clarity in mental, artistic, spiritual, or physical purity. So I know that was a lot, but we're going to end this section here. And now we're going to get into Purity 2.0 and what that actually looks like, because it's very constructive and very helpful. All right, everybody. So that's going to wrap it up for this episode. I'm going to stop it here so that you can take some time to re-listen to any parts where the information was quite dense, or if something struck your attention and you want to go back and really listen to it and let it sink in. And in next episode, we're going to get into Purity 2.0 and kind of like the positive building of the new world. Because think about it. Imagine a human race that has a ton of bandwidth in their minds because they have a clear mind. It's a pure mind. It's focused on goodness and optimism and problem solving because it's not wasting all of its energy, defending itself and fighting and all this stuff. And a clear heart that really feels hope and feels connected, like empathetically to the world around it, and a spirit that is so bright and that it causes the body to move into such positive action. When you have a society like that, that is the kingdom of heaven on earth. And so this is where we're headed. That's why the topic of purity is so important for us to understand. And sexual purity is like it's a non-negotiable aspect of general purity. So please dig deep and pray about this stuff, and I'll see you in the next episode.
Hey, you, this is your call to action if you want to purify yourself, purify your mind, purify your brain, your body, your soul, my friend. Boy, we have an opportunity for you. We have a completely free webinar on how to break free from porn and masturbation using all of our tactics and experience over the years that we've learned, hearing real stories from real people about how they purified themselves. Check it out at highnoon.org. It's the first thing you'll see. A free webinar on how to quit porn. Just click on start here at the top of the page and y'all will love it. You'll love it. I'll see you there.